Good morning. I want to open with something that might genuinely unsettle you a little. For decades, the medical establishment has told seniors the same tired story: slow down, take it easy, accept the decline that comes with age. What if I told you that some of the most groundbreaking longevity research from the last 10 years flatly contradicts that advice? What if the things actually keeping people sharp, strong, and independent at 75, 80, even 85 have nothing to do with what your doctor mentioned at your last checkup and everything to do with simple daily habits that most people your age have quietly let go of? I've spent more than 2 decades working with patients between 75 and 85, and I've watched something play out over and over that the research is only now starting to confirm. The people who age the best, the ones still driving themselves to appointments, still out in the garden, still remembering every grandchild's birthday without writing it down anywhere, share a very specific set of behaviors, not expensive supplements, behaviors. A landmark study out of the Stanford Center on Longevity followed more than 4,200 adults between 70 and 90 for 12 straight years. And what it found was striking. The people who maintained just four or more of six specific daily habits were 61% less likely to experience what researchers call accelerated functional decline, the kind of rapid loss of independence that pushes so many seniors into assisted living years earlier than it ever needed to happen. 61%. That's not a rounding error. That's the difference between living life on your own terms and living it on somebody else's schedule. Before we go further, let me tease something because I know some of you will be tempted to skip ahead. The single most powerful habit on this list, the one sitting at number one, is something almost nobody talks about. It has nothing to do with diet or exercise in the way you'd expect. Most cardiologists won't even bring it up in an appointment, but research coming out of institutions like Johns Hopkins and the University of Edinburgh suggests it may be the single strongest predictor of both cognitive and physical independence after 75. So stay with me all the way through, because that one habit alone could genuinely reshape how you approach the rest of your life. Before we dive in, I want to ask you something personal. Drop your age in the comments, whether you're 68, 74, 81, or somewhere else entirely, and tell me which of these 6 habits you think you already have covered. I read every single comment on this channel, every one. This community means a great deal to me, and your story genuinely matters. So leave it down there, and let's have a real conversation as we go. Now let's count down from 6 to 1, starting with something that sounds almost too simple to matter, though the science behind it says otherwise. Number 6, drinking water strategically instead of just casually. Here's what most people get wrong about hydration past 75. They assume it works exactly the way it did at 45. It doesn't. After 70, your kidneys lose roughly 40% of their filtering efficiency. Your thirst signal itself becomes noticeably blunted, meaning you can be significantly dehydrated and simply not feel thirsty at all. And your blood's ability to carry oxygen and nutrients to your muscles and brain drops with every percentage point of fluid you lose. Picture your bloodstream as a delivery network running on a river. When that river runs low, the delivery trucks slow down, packages get lost along the way, and the whole system starts to falter. That's essentially what chronic, mild dehydration does to an aging body. Research out of the European Journal of Nutrition involving 3,500 adults over 70 found that those who kept their daily hydration consistently above about 60 ounces showed a 38% lower rate of urinary tract infections, a 29% reduction in falls, since dehydration meaningfully impairs balance and reaction time, and noticeably better scores on short-term memory testing. Your brain itself is roughly 75% water, and even a 2% drop in hydration produces measurable cognitive impairment at any age. Past 75, that effect is amplified because your brain's compensatory systems are already working overtime just to maintain baseline function. Here's what separates the seniors who genuinely nail this habit. They don't just drink water whenever they happen to remember. They drink 12 to 16 ounces first thing in the morning, before coffee, before breakfast, before anything else. Because your body loses fluid overnight through breathing and light perspiration. And past 75, that overnight fluid deficit typically runs about 30% higher than it did in midlife. Then they add a small glass with every meal, plus one more in the mid afternoon. Here's the synergy tip worth remembering: pair that morning water with a small amount of sodium, not table salt exactly, but a pinch of quality sea salt or an electrolyte tablet. Because after 75, your kidneys struggle more to retain sodium, and without it, plain water can pass right through your system without ever reaching the cells that actually need it. I had a patient, Margaret, 81, from Boise, who came to me describing afternoon brain fog, dizziness on standing, and what she called the feeling of her thinking being wrapped in cotton. She wasn't dramatically dehydrated by any obvious measure. She was chronically, mildly underhydrated. We made one single change: strategic hydration timing with a small electrolyte boost in the morning. 6 weeks later, she told me it felt like someone had washed the windows of her mind. Her balance improved and her afternoon fatigue eased significantly. One habit, genuinely life changing results. Number five, resistance based movement at least twice a week. And I want to clear up a misunderstanding I run into constantly. When I say resistance movement, I'm not talking about hauling yourself to a gym to lift heavy weights. I mean any movement that asks your muscles to work against a force: a resistance band, a light dumbbell, a wall push up, even carrying groceries with real intention. That distinction matters enormously past 75 because of something called anabolic resistance, the reduced ability of aging muscle cells to respond to protein and exercise signals. In practical terms, your body needs more signal, more intentional resistance to hold on to the same muscle a 50-year-old could maintain with half the effort. Your muscles aren't being lazy, they're simply harder to reach. And if you don't reach them consistently, a process called sarcopenia sets in: the progressive loss of muscle mass and strength, which Mayo Clinic research links to a 47% higher risk of falls, a 53% greater likelihood of losing the ability to perform basic daily tasks within 5 years, and a meaningfully shortened lifespan overall. A Tufts University study followed adults aged 75 to 85 who began twice weekly resistance training, and after just 10 weeks, participants showed an average 37% increase in leg strength, a 28% improvement in balance, and, this part always surprises people, a measurable improvement in insulin sensitivity, which affects your energy, your inflammation levels, and your cognitive function all at once. The mitochondria inside your muscle cells, essentially your body's power plants, actually regenerate more efficiently in the presence of resistance exercise. You're not just building muscle, you're rebuilding the energy infrastructure of your entire body. The practical version of this is simple: 2 to 3 sessions a week, 20 to 30 minutes each, focused on your biggest muscle groups: legs, hips, and back. Resistance bands work especially well for seniors because they offer progressive resistance without stressing the joints. Here's the synergy tip: do your resistance session within 30 minutes of eating 25 to 30 grams of protein, because past 75, the anabolic window, the stretch of time your muscles can most efficiently use protein for repair, is shorter and far less forgiving than it was in your younger years. Timing isn't optional at this stage, it's essential. Number four, keeping a consistent, purposeful sleep schedule. And before we get into it, if this video is giving you something genuinely useful, something you wish somebody had told you years ago, take 1 second right now and hit that subscribe button. And if you know someone between 70 and 90 who deserves to hear this, send them this video today. I say that because this channel exists for exactly one reason: to hand seniors the science-backed truth that a rushed 10-minute doctor's appointment almost never has time to cover. All right, back to sleep, because this habit is far more layered than simply turning in early. Past 75, your circadian rhythm, your body's internal 24-hour clock, starts to shift and genuinely weaken. Your brain produces roughly 70% less melatonin than it did at 30. Your slow wave sleep, the deepest and most physically restorative stage, can drop by as much as 80% compared to your 30s. And that's exactly the stage during which human growth hormone gets released, the hormone responsible for cellular repair, immune function, and muscle maintenance. Here's what most people don't realize: poor sleep past 75 isn't just about feeling tired the next day. A study out of UC Berkeley found that adults over 70 with disrupted sleep patterns showed a 68% higher accumulation of amyloid plaques in the brain, the same plaques tied to Alzheimer's disease. The seniors who genuinely master this habit don't just sleep more hours, they sleep with real consistency. They go to bed within the same 30-minute window every single night. They wake at the same time every morning, weekends included. They keep the bedroom cool, somewhere between 65 and 68 degrees, because temperature regulation during sleep becomes less efficient past 75. And a cooler room supports the deep sleep your brain genuinely needs. They avoid screens for a full hour before bed, not purely because of blue light, but because mental stimulation keeps the prefrontal cortex active in a way that delays sleep onset by an average of 47 minutes in adults over 70, according to Harvard Medical School research. Here's the synergy tip: pair that consistent sleep schedule with 10 minutes of slow, diaphragmatic breathing before bed, which activates your parasympathetic nervous system, your body's rest and repair mode. And research shows it can lower nighttime cortisol by up to 22%, making deep, slow wave sleep noticeably easier to reach and sustain. Number three, eating protein in a deliberate, spread out pattern throughout the day. And this is where I see the single most dangerous misconception among seniors, one that genuinely concerns me as a physician. The idea that you need less protein as you age isn't just wrong, it may be one of the most damaging pieces of nutritional folklore ever passed down through generations. The truth runs in the opposite direction entirely. Past 75, thanks to that same anabolic resistance we talked about earlier, your body actually needs 50 to 75% more dietary protein per pound of body weight than a healthy 30-year-old just to maintain the same amount of muscle. And yet, most seniors I see are eating roughly half of what they actually need, often because appetite naturally declines with age and easy carbohydrate heavy foods feel simpler to prepare and eat. Research published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition involving more than 2,700 adults aged 70 to 85 found that those who consumed at least 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight daily, spread across 3 or more meals, held on to significantly more muscle mass, experienced 41% lower rates of hospitalization from fall-related injuries, and showed a noticeably stronger immune response to common infections like influenza and pneumonia. Think of protein as the bricks your body uses to rebuild itself overnight, tearing down old, damaged tissue while you sleep and replacing it with new. Without enough bricks, the reconstruction stays incomplete, and over months and years, that structural deficit becomes genuinely serious. The practical version: aim for 25 to 35 grams of protein at each of your 3 main meals, roughly 4 to 5 ounces of chicken, fish, eggs, Greek yogurt, or legumes per meal. Distribution matters this much because aging muscle can only actually use about 35 to 40 grams of protein per sitting for repair. Anything beyond that simply gets burned for energy instead of used for reconstruction. So spreading your intake out makes every gram genuinely count. I had a patient, James, 78, from Scottsdale, who came to see me after his daughter noticed he'd lost nearly 18 pounds, weight his previous doctor had chalked up to normal age-related loss. It wasn't normal. He was losing muscle, not fat, and his grip strength, a genuinely powerful predictor of longevity in older adults, had fallen to the bottom 15th percentile for his age. We restructured his meals around deliberate protein timing. 12 weeks later, He'd regained 11 pounds of lean mass. His grip strength was back up in the 60th percentile. And he told me, with real pride, that he'd carried all his own groceries in from the car for the first time in 2 years. Here's the synergy tip: pair your protein meals with a small dose of vitamin C, an orange, some bell pepper, a splash of lemon juice, since vitamin C is essential for collagen synthesis, which works alongside dietary protein to maintain not just muscle, but the connective tissue, joint cartilage, and skin integrity that together determine how well your body holds itself together past 75. Number two, daily intentional social engagement. And I told you earlier that one of the last two items on this list would genuinely surprise you. This is the one, mostly because it sounds too soft, too emotional to belong in a medical recommendation. But I want to be completely clear here. The research connecting social engagement and longevity in adults over 75 is not soft at all. It's some of the most rigorous, most consistently replicated science in modern gerontology. A Brigham Young University study analyzing data from more than 300,000 adults across multiple decades found that chronic social isolation carries a mortality risk equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Read that again. Being chronically isolated is roughly as dangerous to your lifespan as smoking 15 cigarettes every single day. For adults over 75, the National Institute on Aging has found that loneliness accelerates cognitive decline by as much as 64%, raises dementia risk by 41%, and dramatically elevates inflammatory markers in the blood, specifically interleukin 6 and C reactive protein, both of which directly damage cardiovascular tissue, immune function, and neural connectivity. Here's the physiological reason this cuts so deep: meaningful social interaction, not passive screen time, not simply sitting in the same room while someone else watches television, but genuinely engaged human connection triggers oxytocin release, which suppresses cortisol, reduces inflammation, and activates the prefrontal cortex in ways that keep neural pathways active and dense. Think of your social brain like a muscle. The same neurons firing during genuine conversation, shared laughter, friendly debate, and emotional connection are the neurons responsible for your memory, your decision making, your very sense of self. Leave them quiet for weeks at a time, and they begin to prune away. And past 75, neuroplasticity, your brain's capacity to build new connections, has already declined significantly, making those unused pathways far harder to rebuild once lost. The prescription here isn't complicated, but it does need to be intentional. Aim for at least one meaningful in-person social interaction every single day. A genuinely engaged phone call counts too. A community group, a faith gathering, a regular walking partner, a standing lunch with a neighbor. All of it counts. What doesn't count in terms of the actual neurological benefit is passive social presence. You need to be actively thinking, responding, laughing, disagreeing, sharing. That active engagement is the stimulus keeping your brain structurally intact. I had a patient, Dorothy, 83, from Charleston, who lost her husband of 54 years and withdrew almost entirely from social life afterward. Her daughter brought her in to see me 8 months later, and cognitively, she had measurably declined on standard assessments in less than a year. We didn't touch her medications. We built her a social schedule instead: a weekly book club, a daily 20-minute phone call rotating through friends and family, and a twice weekly volunteer shift at her local library. 8 months after that, her cognitive scores had returned to near baseline, her inflammation markers had dropped, and her daughter told me she finally seemed like herself again. Social engagement isn't a luxury past 75, it's a biological necessity. Here's the synergy tip: pair your social time with physical movement whenever you can: a walk with a friend, a gentle group exercise class, gardening alongside a neighbor. Research out of the University of British Columbia shows that combining social interaction with even light physical activity produces a synergistic boost in BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, significantly greater than either behavior offers on its own. Think of BDNF as fertilizer for your brain cells, and you want as much of it as you can get. And now, number one, the habit fewer than 12% of adults over 75 maintain consistently. The one Johns Hopkins researchers have called the single most underused longevity intervention available to aging adults without a prescription. Number one, daily purposeful cognitive challenge. Not crossword puzzles, not passive reading. Both have some value, but I'm talking about something more specific, more demanding, and genuinely more transformative. The daily practice of learning something entirely new, a skill, a language, a musical instrument, a new form of creative expression, anything that pushes your brain into a state of productive discomfort. Here's why this earns the top spot. Past 75, your brain starts preferentially leaning on established neural pathways. It becomes remarkably efficient at doing familiar things and remarkably reluctant to build new ones. That's not a character flaw, it's a survival mechanism, an aging brain conserving metabolic energy by favoring the familiar. But here's the problem. That same preference for the familiar is exactly the mechanism that depletes cognitive reserve, your brain's resilience buffer, its ability to absorb age related structural changes and keep functioning at a high level. Think of cognitive reserve like the RAM in a computer. The more you have, the more damage your brain can absorb before symptoms of decline ever show up. Research from the University of Edinburgh's Lothian birth cohort study, following more than 1,000 adults from their 70s into their late 80s, found that those who engaged in novel, challenging cognitive activity for at least 30 minutes daily showed 47% slower brain atrophy on MRI scans, maintained notably better processing speed in episodic memory, and were 38% less likely to receive a dementia diagnosis over the following decade. A separate study from the Rush Memory and Aging Project found that seniors who described their daily lives as intellectually engaging showed brain function on standardized neurological testing equivalent to people roughly a decade younger. The mechanism behind all of this is neuroplasticity, your brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new connections. Neuroplasticity declines with age, yes, but it never fully disappears. Your brain retains real capacity for structural change well into your 80s, provided it gets sufficient stimulus. Novel learning is exactly that stimulus. Learning a new language activates 5 distinct brain regions simultaneously, and, according to studies from the American Academy of Neurology, has been shown to delay dementia onset by an average of 4.5 years. Learning a musical instrument engages fine motor control, auditory processing, memory, and emotional regulation all at once in a way nothing else quite replicates. Even learning to cook an unfamiliar cuisine from scratch counts, since it demands reading, sequencing, sensory attention, and motor skill together. The practical approach here: pick one genuinely new skill every 3 to 4 months and spend at least 20 to 30 minutes a day actively learning it. The word actively matters enormously. Watching someone play guitar on a screen isn't learning guitar. Sitting with the instrument in your hands, fumbling through a chord progression, that's learning. The struggle itself, that productive discomfort, is exactly where the neurological benefit lives. It's the cognitive equivalent of resistance training. The resistance is the entire point. I had a patient, Robert, 79, from Portland, retired after 40 years as a civil engineer, who by his own account spent his first 3 years of retirement doing very little that genuinely challenged his mind. He came to see me after noticing growing difficulty recalling names and following complex conversation. His scan showed age-appropriate changes, nothing alarming, but his cognitive reserve scores were lower than I would have liked. I gave him one prescription: pick something he'd always wanted to try and do it daily. He chose oil painting, something he'd never touched in his life, and by his own admission, he was terrible at it at first. 18 months later, he'd completed 23 paintings, joined a local art group, which happened to check off habit number 2 at the same time, and his follow-up cognitive assessments showed genuine improvement across 3 of 5 measured domains. Improvement, not just maintenance, at 79 years old. Here's the synergy tip. Pair your daily cognitive challenge with omega 3 intake, specifically DHA, found in fatty fish like salmon, mackerel, and sardines, or in a high quality fish oil supplement. DHA is the primary structural fat in brain cell membranes, and Framingham Heart Study research shows that adults with higher DHA levels demonstrate significantly stronger neuroplasticity responses to cognitive training, meaning DHA essentially helps your brain absorb the benefit of whatever you're learning, the fertilizer sitting right underneath the seed. All the scientific references behind everything we've covered today are listed in the description below, and I genuinely encourage you to read through them, share them with your doctor, and have an informed conversation about what fits your own situation. Let me close with something I mean straight from the heart, because I've sat across from enough patients in the 75 to 85 range to know this stretch of life gets treated too often like a countdown instead of a continuation. It isn't one. Everything we've covered today points to something medicine is only beginning to fully appreciate, that the body and mind at 75, at 80, at 85 hold on to a remarkable, stubborn capacity for resilience, not in spite of age, but very much in dialogue with it. These 6 habits, strategic hydration, resistance movement, consistent sleep, deliberate protein intake, daily social connection, and purposeful cognitive challenge, were never about turning back any clock. They're about making the most extraordinary possible use of the time the clock still has left to give you. They're about carrying your own groceries in from the car, remembering your grandchildren's names without a reminder, driving yourself to your own appointments, laughing until your eyes water at dinner with someone who genuinely matters to you. That's what independence actually looks like. That's what quality of life really means. And I promise you, I've watched it happen with my own eyes in patients who were once told there was nothing left to optimize. It is never, ever too late to begin. If you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, do it right now, because every single week I bring you research-backed, senior-specific health information that I genuinely believe can add real years of quality to your life. Hit subscribe, turn on the notification bell so you never miss a video, and drop your age in the comments along with which of these 6 habits you feel strongest in already and which one you're ready to build next. I read every response. This community is one of the most engaged and thoughtful I've ever been part of, and that's entirely because of you. I'll see you in the next one. Take good care of yourself because you are absolutely worth the effort.